Hello everyone, this is the second part to lesson 4.1 and 4.2. These lessons are kind of combined, but we're mostly going to be focusing on 4.2, which has a little bit more word problems and is just takes what you learned in the 4.1 discovery activity and just looks at a different solution method, algebraic instead of graphically, like graphing it. That's the way you solve the problems in 4.1, but now we're going to learn how to solve problems algebraically. So, for example, one of the questions that you had on the activity was, so say you have the point 6, 3, and you know that it has a slope of 2. So if we wanted to write it in slope-intercept form, y equals mx plus b, we know what the m is, that's 2, so 2x plus b, but you don't know what b is. So the way you did it last time is you plotted the point and you used the slope to get to figure out where the y-intercept would be. But there's a different way. So since you know the point, you know the x and the y. So what you can do is you can plug the 6 and the 3 in for x and y into the equation we have so far, and then we can solve for b. So let's do that. So y is 3, and then you've got the 2, and then x is 6, and then plus b. So then you have 3 equals, we're going to multiply the 2 and the 6 next, order of operations. And then we're going to subtract the 12 to get b by itself. So 3 minus 12 is negative 9. So then your final equation is y equals 2x minus 9. So that's the algebraic way to write an equation in slope-intercept form. Now the reason we might want to learn it this way is because, what if we don't have graph paper with us? This is a quick way to solve algebraically. And also, what if the y-intercept is not an integer? What if it's a fraction? Then we would need to figure out this way, because if it crossed through the y-axis at a point that wasn't an integer, then we might not know exactly where it is. So we wouldn't want to guess, especially if it's kind of a yucky fraction, as we'll see in our first example. So we'll look at one example of this, and then we'll get into the word problems, or maybe 2 examples. So your first example is you've got the point 5, negative 4, and then you have a slope of 1/3. All right, so let's take your y equals mx plus b, and let's plug in the values that we know. So y is negative 4, m is 1/3, x is 5. I'm going to write it, though, as 5 over 1, because I know I'm going to multiply it by this fraction, so it's easier to multiply a fraction by a fraction than a fraction by a whole number. And then plus b is what we're trying to solve, so we don't know that yet. All right, so then simplify this part, which would end up just being 5/3. And then you would subtract the 5/3 from both sides. All right, now, for those of you who struggle with fractions, go ahead and just type this in your calculator with your fraction button. If you want to go ahead and try to solve it yourself, you would have to change negative 4 to a fraction, an equivalent fraction with a denominator of 3. So you put this over 1 and you multiply top and bottom by 3, so it'd be negative 12/3. So negative 12 minus 5 is negative 17/3. All right, so then your equation is y equals 1/3 x minus 17/3. Usually when you have a fraction a lot of times if you have a fraction for the slope, the denominator will be the same as the denominator for the y-intercept. I won't necessarily say always, but a lot of times it'll happen that way. So that would be your final equation. As you can see, the 17/3 is not something we would be able to estimate. You could write this as a mixed number, but don't write it as a decimal because it would be like a repeating decimal. Okay, so would just keep it as a fraction. All right, let's try one more example like that where we plug everything in. Let's do Let's do this one here. So you've got 2 points, negative 10, 7, and 5, negative 3. So the first thing you would need to do here would be to find the slope, since you're not given the slope. Okay, so I'm going to do 7 minus negative 3, which is plus 3, and then negative 10 minus 5, which becomes plus minus. So this would be 10 over negative 15, which simplifies to negative 2/3. So negative 2/3 would be the slope. Okay, so now let's do the second part where you plug the values into y equals mx plus b. Now the question here is, which point do you choose? So it doesn't matter which point you choose, but it might be easier to choose the one with less complicated numbers. And so I would say this one, because the values are lower. So let's plug in negative 3 for y, m as negative 2/3, x is 5 over 1, and then plus b. So simplify the m and the x first. So that would be negative 10/3, and then add the 10/3 over. So negative 3 with the denominator of 3 would be negative 9/3. So you're doing negative 9/3 plus 10/3, which is positive 1/3 equals b. Okay, so then your final equation would be y equals negative 2/3 is the slope we found above, x plus 1/3. All right, so as you can see, algebra is getting a little more complicated. Okay, so make sure you're taking good notes and you're understanding the steps and you're kind of going over it in your mind. Okay, what did we just do? Why did we do it? What's our final answer supposed to look like? Okay, so this is what our final answer is supposed to look like. We're supposed to get an equation where you have an m and a b. So to find the m, you found the slope. To find the b, you plugged in your given information into y equals mx plus b, and then just solved for b. Okay, so now let's look at the word problem for this lesson. All right, so your gym membership costs $33 per month after an initial membership fee. So $33 per month, okay, that should stand out to you as the slope. So m is going to be equal to 33. Whenever it says per month, that means it's the slope. You paid a total of $228 after 6 months. So $228 after 6 months. How would you write that as a coordinate? Well, time is usually the x and money is usually the y. So in this case, that coordinate would be 6, 228. And then we have a slope of 33. Write an equation that gives the total cost as a function of the length of your gym membership in months. So that means that the months is the x and the total cost is the y. So, and then this is the second part that we'll answer later. So essentially you want to write an equation in y equals mx plus b. So this is just like our first example where you have the slope and then where you have the y-intercept. So obviously you're not going to want to graph this because 6 and 228 is going to be hard to graph. So let's use our algebraic methods. So we're going to take our equation. I always like to write it out first and then plug in what we know. So y is 228, the m is 33, the x is 6 plus b. 33 times 6, well, 30 times 6 is 180. We're doing some mental math here. And then 3 times 6 is 18. So if you add those together, you would get 198. So 228 equals 198 plus b. Subtract 198 on both sides. And you get 30 equals b. So then your equation would be y equals 33x plus 30. So then so 33 per month after initial membership fee. Okay, so then find the total cost after 9 months. So there's our equation for the first part. So after 9 months, so if 9 is equal to x, then we would plug it in for the x. So 33 times 9 plus 30. 30 times 9 is 270. 3 times 9 is 27. Add them together and you get 297 plus the 30 at the end, and we get $327 and then for 9 months. All right, and then let's do the next one. In bicycle motocross, or BMX, is this supposed to say motor maybe? Anyways, in BMX racing, racers purchase a 1-year membership to a track. They also pay an entry fee for each race at that track. So the 1-year membership will be the Y-intercept, and then the race entry fee per race will be the slope. One racer paid a total of $125 after 5 races. The second racer paid a total of $170 after 8 races. So if we were to write these as coordinates, remember the terms independent and dependent. So independent variable in this case would be the number of races. So 5 is your x, and then the dependent variable, your y, is going to be the amount of money, because the amount of money is going to depend on the number of races you go to. Okay, so then the other coordinate would be 8 and 170. So, part 1, what is the entry fee per race, and how much does the track membership cost? So number 1 is asking you what the slope is. So let's go ahead and answer that question by finding the slope. So let's do 170 minus 125. I always like to do the bigger number minus the smaller number, so I get a positive slope if possible, instead of negative divide by negative, and then 8 minus 5. So this gives us, 45 over 3, which then would be $15 per race. So $15 per race. That is the M. And then how much does the track membership cost? So this is asking you for the B, the Y-intercept. So let's use the methods. Remember when we did this question, you had 2 points. You picked the easier point to work with, you plugged it into the slope-intercept form, and then you solved for B. So we're going to do that same thing here. And then obviously then I'm going to pick the 5, 125. So I'll just draw a little line here. This is the second part. So y equals mx plus b. The y is 125. The slope that we found is 15. The x is 5. And then plus b. And if you're like Mrs. Billig, I'm never going to remember this. Don't worry. With practice, you will, okay? And we will definitely be doing lots of practice with this. And when I do a question like this in Edulastic, it'll give you like step-by-step the parts for each. And I'll lead you through each part. Okay, so 15 times 5 is 75. Minus the 75 on both sides, and you get 50. Okay, so $50 is then the yearly membership fee. So part 3, write an equation that gives the total cost as a function of the number of races entered, which would be y equals 15x plus 50. Your fee per race plus the yearly membership fee. All right, that concludes this lesson, and I hope you have a great day.